So today, as we have just recorded this for the first time, is Sinn Féin elected representatives from the Dáil, from the Seanad, from the Northern Assembly and Executive, Westminster, and from our local councillors groups, North and South, and our group in the European Parliament, coming together with activists who support us to meet and to discuss and to plan our work in the year ahead. And it's an unprecedented gathering. We're representing here the largest political party on the island of Ireland. And I think this gathering and our discussion demonstrates very visibly the all-Ireland nature of our work and of our Republican project. And for the next 2 days we will be solution-focused. Obviously we have to have the hard analysis and the critical discussion, but will be about constructive engagement to bring forward proposals which are all about, or should be all about, trying to improve conditions for citizens and to further the goal of a united Ireland and a new republic with equality and social justice at its core. And we'll also discuss how we can best hold the government here to account. Now, if you just reflect back in the last year, the Taoiseach and his cabinet colleagues expended considerable energy and political capital in fruitlessly defending the former Minister for Justice, Alan Shatter. And loyalty to friends, I think, is an admirable trait. But it should not take precedence over the public interest or good governance. And in the nomination of Minister Hogan to the EU Commission, the Taoiseach is repeating the mistake he made in blindly defending Alan Shatter. Yes, it's good that we should have the commissionership. Yes, it's good that we should have the agricultural portfolio. But the Minister Shatter is not a good nominee for that position. And if you watch what happened in terms of the Labour Party's role, and it's entirely in keeping with the dynamic within the coalition, Labour played second fiddle. They lobbied for Eamon Gilmore for that post, but in a reprise of Mr Gilmore's unfortunate election slogan, it's been Fine Gael's way, all the way. And their way has become more and more, well, it was always, I suppose, about spin more than substance, but it's become more and more bizarre. When the Troika was in charge, the government essentially did what it was told. It followed the plan that was laid out for it. But then tasked and challenged with devising a plan of its own, the government, and just think back now in the months or so into the summer recess, the government stumbled from one debacle to another. They clearly didn't understand how to govern efficiently or with any degree of fairness whatsoever. And it seems to me that the Taoiseach is primarily focused on hanging in to the bitter end, to the end of his term, despite huge public opposition to the government's policies. This government is more unpopular than any previous government in a very, very, very long time. And they seem to be totally impervious to the crippling effects on citizens and families of the property tax, of water tax, of the range of other stealth charges. Now, we had a good election, but as I keep saying to people, judge us in what we deliver, not on how many votes or how many seats we have, but how we use the mandate that we are given. But the elections in May confirmed that an increasing number of citizens are responding to Sinn Féin's message that there is a better way, there is a fairer way to make the necessary deficit adjustments while protecting vital public services and social supports. And the reports that the Taoiseach reshuffled junior ministries in relation to how they may impact upon the growth of Sinn Féin, that merely highlights the fact that the government didn't get the message. They weren't listening to what the people were saying. Because the real problem for this government isn't Sinn Féin. It's the fact that citizens have rejected the agenda of relentless austerity and the unfair way that hard-working families and vulnerable people are being penalised. So to Aharamore the ye. What the voters clearly told the government was there needs to be a change. That it needs to change from the disastrous political path it has followed since 2011. And that path is a clear betrayal of voters who were told in beautiful prose that there was going to be a new political era, that the business of government would change fundamentally, that a new vision would become a reality. But Níl rudder be Ahraha. In fact, the government quickly slipped into Fianna Fáil mode, and the old discredited way of doing politics has continued. And many citizens feel betrayed, especially by the actions of the Labour Party, which broke almost every single promise it made. And then Pat Rabbit, when he said, well, you tend to say things like that during an election campaign, don't you? That deeply cynical remark may yet serve as an epitaph for this government. And then we listened just as we come off the summer break, those of us who got a break, and listened to government ministers talking to everyone who listened to them about the recovery. But yet, under their watch, the social and economic problems are now at a tipping point for many citizens. Any of us who are publicly known, you can't walk the length of, even coming in here today, even coming in here this morning, of people who are just crippled by what the government is doing. So, struggling families will not accept talk of a recovery until they see evidence of it in their daily lives. And on the issue of social housing and the social housing crisis, the government seeks to cobble together something now in its sort of third, going into its fourth year. This is a deep crisis. It's most obvious and most extreme in the Dublin area. But here, even in this constituency of Louth, we have a huge housing list, a huge number of homeless people. And there's not enough available social housing to meet demand. Neither is there a plan from the government to resolve this crisis. And that means that families are forced into private rented accommodation, and those rents are increasing year on year since the present government took office, but the minister refuses to even consider rent controls. And families are being pushed out of their homes due to the inflexibility of government policy and the unwillingness to provide new public housing stock, which would also be a stimulus for the construction industry. The government's grand plan, performed and orchestrated with great arrogance by James Reilly, that's the grand plan to reform our health service. It lies in tatters. Leo Varadkar, in his first act as a minister, shelved the coalition's so-called big idea of universal private health insurance. And yesterday, Minister Varadkar was publicly chastised by the Taoiseach. How dare a minister speak his mind? And then we have the ongoing sustained spin by the government parties as we approach the budget. But this budget's also going to be a big test for Labour's new leader, Joan Burton. And let's not forget, every single measure that this government brought in budgets and in other cuts, was voted for by every single Labour TD or senator who remains in the Labour Party. Joan Burton helped to negotiate the programme for government, which saw Labour buy into the austerity policies of Fine Gael, in direct breach of the mandate they were given. She was a member of the Cabinet which implements that programme for government. And don't want to be speaking for too long, but I was down in Roscommon with Martin and some of the rest of us the other day. This state has a population here of close on 5 million, perhaps 4.5 to 5 million. 500,000 people have been forced to leave in the last 8 years. 500,000. Colossal social damage to communities, to families, to just our sense of ourselves. And it's when you go into rural Ireland and go into the West particularly that you see that. Joan Burton presided over that. This government sees, as Fianna Fáil used to, emigration, forced emigration, as a policy option. She's also overseen the implementation of water charges, the property tax, cuts to child benefit, the removal of medical cards, cuts to health and welfare, and a succession of stealth taxes. And the Taoiseach's defence on all of these issues has been that these were cabinet decisions. So this cabinet, mostly of men sitting around a table, decided to take away carers' allowances, decided to take money from people with disabilities, decided to take away child benefit, even though we were told by the former Taoiseach that the issue of child benefit was a red line issue, and we were told by the Taoiseach that the issue of disability payments was a red line issue for him. So despite all the spin, the Labour leader cannot distance herself from the disastrous policies of this government, and nor should she be allowed to. She is one of the architects of austerity. She's robustly defended it against criticism, and she and the Taoiseach must bear responsibility for the awful adverse social consequences of these decisions. For our part, we have tried to demonstrate that there is a different way, a clear, workable, fair alternative to the way this government is doing things. Tá muid ará a gcónaí go bhfuil bailach eile an bailach níos fearr agus bailach atá bunatha or co-anonymous. And sin an focal is níos tábhacht tá co-anonymous. Equality. Equality has to be the watchword of this party, and equality should be a foundation stone of any society which claims to be a republic. So we want to take our mandate, and we want to take society, and we want to take the economy in a different direction. And I think the centenary of 1916, the discussion and the debate, will allow all of us who have a concern and who have hopes and who have vision and who have also a sense of the great possibilities. We have great faith in people, the great potential there is about Ireland's future. We will seek next week to move the writs for the Roscommon, South Leitrim and the Dublin South West by-elections. We will be asking the government to support that. Remember, when Pearse Doherty in 2010 took the court case after 18 months of a refusal by Fianna Fáil to call a by-election in Donegal, South West, these elections now have to be held within 6 months. So we want this election to be held, these two elections to be held before the end of November, and there's no reason to delay them. The people of these constituencies deserve to be properly represented. So we'll go into those constituencies, we'll put forward our alternatives, and we will ask the people of Dublin South West and Roscommon South Leitrim to make the change, to vote for Cathal King and to vote for Martin Kenny, and we will fight those two campaigns to win. There's no certainty, of course, that we will win, but we will fight them to win and to bring two other activists into our Oireachtas team. Agus creidem go bhfuil me jabalta na ga Síocháin sin a bun cheanch. Now, Fianna Fáil, I happen to agree with, I won't name names, the person who said that the people are not ready for Fianna Fáil to be back in government again. They can't provide a credible alternative to this Fine Gael Labour government because Fine Gael and Labour are implementing Fianna Fáil policy. Fianna Fáil, Labour, Fine Gael, all part of the consensus for cuts. The water tax, for example, was a Fianna Fáil idea. And the opportunity, you see, out of every crisis there comes an opportunity. So that the economic collapse between 2008 and 2010 should have been a wake-up call, should have been an opportunity to genuinely go in a fundamentally different direction. That hasn't happened. Instead, short-sighted, destructive austerity policies are imposed on those suffering the most. We're also very, very conscious. We understand we're responsible citizens and activists, the state's financial position and the economic position. But we do not subscribe to the excuse that there is no alternative. The people are bearing the burden of the government's putting billions into bad banks and to paying off dishonest developers, financiers and others in those institutions. So the government always has choices, and we contend that they have made the wrong choices by piling the burden on the backs of ordinary people. So we've tried to demand, and Pierce Doherty's been in the forefront of this, that budgets are underpinned by the principle of fairness, that those who can afford to pay the most should pay the most. We have also had, as I said earlier, a view of the social consequences. We've asked in the Dáil Chamber, is there an equality proofing of government measures? There isn't. We've consistently put forward alternative budgets, and we'll do the same this year, and we will challenge the government to take on board our proposals, and we will present that budget in October. We will also spell out our continued opposition to the water tax and the family home tax. We'll argue for budget resources to be targeted at job creation and stimulating economic growth across all the regions. And we'll seek the adoption of a housing policy which delivers the necessary social housing stock to meet the needs of those on waiting lists, and we will support those in mortgage arrears. And we will oppose further cuts to the health budget, push for increased funding for mental health provision, and this is the week of National Suicide Awareness, and we will seek the resolution of the government's medical card debacle, led in all of that by our health spokesperson, Caoimhín Ó Cuileáin. There also needs to be a continuing focus on institutional and political reform to address the lack of accountability and transparency within the Oireachtas, within government departments and in the policing and justice systems. And agus mar is all the ahandanna ta process políteachta sa tuas ceart a drobláid. Over the last year or so, a very negative political axis is currently seeking in the north to undermine the Good Friday Agreement and to turn back the clock on all the progress that has been made. We saw the leaders of political unionism walking away from the Haas O'Sullivan talks, just as they walked away from the all-party talks on creating identity and the past. And we now have the ludicrous position of the First Minister and the other unionist leader who have repeatedly walked away from talks, now saying they want new talks. And they know a lot of this is game playing. Some of them hanker for a return to majority rule, but they know in their hearts that's never, ever, ever going to happen, that the old ways are gone, that the Orange State is gone. But rather than bring them to their senses in this regard, the British government and its interventions has merely encouraged intransigence. We're open to negotiations, we're open to dialogue. We've said very clearly that the Irish and British governments and the US administration, which has been an ally of this process, should be involved. I also want to address the remarks made recently by Foreign Affairs Minister Charlie Flanagan, the man who couldn't bring himself to vote in favour of the people of Gaza. The man who couldn't act on behalf of the people of this island and this state in support of a peace process in the Middle East. His remarks about the North and the portrayal of current difficulties seem to be more to do with Fine Gael's narrow electoral considerations in this state than the needs of the political and peace process in the North. They were also inappropriate remarks for a Minister for Foreign Affairs. He should be conscious of his government's responsibility as co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement and other agreements. That's what Minister Flanagan should be doing, making sure that the British government fulfills its responsibility in terms of these agreements. So we have a job of work to do to consolidate the political process in the North, to press the British and Irish governments to implement their commitments, and to stand up to those who seek to undermine the political institutions. Let me be very, very clear. For those who may have some doubt or maybe touting other propositions abroad, Sinn Féin will defend the political institutions. We will defend power sharing and we will defend the equality agenda. Let me also be very, very clear. Sinn Féin is opposed to Toryism, north and south. We're against austerity from David Cameron as much as we're against austerity from Enda Kenny and Joan Burton. This has nothing to do with electoralism. It's got nothing to do with a failure to take difficult decisions. It's what and who we are. I don't know why they don't get it. It's who we are. We're Republicans. We stand for solidarity. We stand for equality. We stand for freedom. We stand for a citizen-centred, rights-based society. And there's also a lazy narrative emerging around, that it's very patronising, and I find it offensive, that, we're just not able to take these tough decisions. Martin McGuinness has shown the way to take tough decisions that put common good before personal or political interest, and he's given an example. So these are the challenges facing us, and we go at it with a good heart, and as I said earlier, with a huge faith, including in the unionist people, to want a better society and a better way forward. There are also in the upcoming period a number of very significant anniversaries, and we'll continue to engage here in Ireland and internationally to remember, to honour and to commemorate the historic events that have shaped contemporary Irish history, including the campaign to conserve and preserve Moore Street as a battlefield site and the National Historic Quarter to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Rising. In the next coming Dáil term, citizens can be sure of one thing. We will continue to robustly hold this government to account. We will honour the mandate we received. We will defend the interests of those on low and middle income, to protect and support the most vulnerable of our citizens, and to continue to develop and to bring forward and promote credible alternative policies that show there's a better and fairer, more decent way of doing things. We'll also continue to defend the process in the North and to actively and robustly promote reconciliation and unity. So Sinead, Tasula Gongome, Diasporach Moi, Samuel, Ogov, Gwynigi Salt, Asan Codal Shaw, August Arai Lynn Lehelia. Go Ramila Margaret.